Well, good morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Here's an update to my heads up for the weather today. I issued one yesterday. Some things have changed. I would say still be on guard for a possible weak tornado in the Ozarks. This is bolstered by the idea, and you can see it on this graph here, there were some tornado warnings just off to the southeast of Oklahoma City and a confirmed tornado. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a stage for what is possible. That doesn't necessarily translate into the Ozarks, but let's talk about it and see where the areas of most concern will be today. So we'll start off this morning by looking at the severe weather outlook from the Storm Prediction Center. So all of the Ozarks are in a level 1, which is a 1 out of 5 risk on the scale, as you can see here. So the green color is 1. And as I speculated in yesterday's video, I thought that this would be the case, that either they would include more of northwest Arkansas or this area here from Tulsa, maybe getting into extreme southwest Missouri. And indeed, they did pull the trigger on a level 2 there. That's for all modes of severe weather. So it would be large hail, inch in diameter or more, wind gusts over 59, 60 miles an hour, or a possible tornado. So those areas around Joplin, and continuing on down I-44 basically on either side of that interstate are under a little bit more risk today for all those modes. But what about the tornado outlook? Again, there's a kind of a broad brush 2% all throughout southwest Missouri and northwest Arkansas. That has not changed since yesterday. This, I believe, was an addition or at least a shift from yesterday's forecast, so it does include a 5% risk Tulsa area down again toward the Oklahoma City area, and part of that's already been verified. So I think the only question I would ask today is, will this area need to be expanded this way a little bit? And my thought is maybe. And they'll update this late morning around noon, and I'll be keeping an eye on that as well, just to let you know. And why are we in a broad brush, just sort of 2% tornado risk? I'll explain that in a minute. Let's take a look, though, at the CSU severe thunderstorm probabilities for today. So they have kind of a verification of a 5%, more of a broad brush tornado outlook for all of the Ozarks, except maybe way off to the northwest, including St. Louis and Little Rock. In fact, the epicenter of this is down in Arkansas, really. They only draw these at certain percentage levels, but what that dot's telling you is that's where the maximum is. Then what's interesting is that the hail kicks in after these thunderstorms pass east of Springfield later on today, and same with the wind gust probabilities, a little bit higher once those storms get organized toward evening and start moving away from us. We have NATOcast here, and this is pretty much a reflection of yesterday's forecast, and it's kind of why I said they might up the ante in this area here, because they're at a 5% risk, again, roughly from Oklahoma City to Tulsa. But you notice there is a 2% risk that kind of crosses the border, if you will, into extreme western Missouri. So it's something to keep an eye on today as well. We'll take a look at the overall flow here. So this is the 500 millibar flow, very, very active shortwave jet stream pattern, which is interesting because the model has kind of split this into two, which I think has some ramifications for today, especially in this area right here that we've been talking about. I need to change to my black pen, I guess. But anyway, there is certainly enough overall wind shear to support what we would call a supercell, a rotating thunderstorm. Now, to get tornadoes, you need low-level rotation and also storms that are based low enough to tap into that. It can exist, but if the storms themselves, the bases are too high, then there's not really much chance that's going to form a tornado. Let's take a look at the instability. So this is Cape at noon, and it's really building up quite strongly here in those darker gray areas. Now, that's not strong by a springtime standard, but it is for January actually pretty strong, and it's just kind of scattered in southwest Missouri, so it's not great. But I've seen more often than not a way for a finger of this to kind of get up ahead of the storms into southwest Missouri, so that's what I'd be watching for today. It's unlikely, though, because I just don't think the sun's coming out at any point, and that would especially help the low-level basically lapse rates, how quickly it cools with height, and if you heat the ground. Of course, a January sun's not going to do much of that. So anyway, I just don't think the instability is there, but it may not need to be because, again, this isn't the overall shear that's there. This is the low-level rotation. So if you see these purple colors, which if you look over here, that's actually pretty high. That means that the encouragement for thunderstorms to rotate in this layer is there. but it's a kind of a lower layer, but a lot of times in the winter, that's the replacing factor. So you have instability that's kind of but you have low-level rotation and overall shear that's pretty impressive, and that's the case at noon today. And one way you can track whether the thunderstorms themselves are doing that is just to look at something called updraft rotation. So this is basically, are these supercells? And there are some streaks. This is just cumulative through 5 p.m. You can see some streaks here. This one is actually kind of notable because I've seen this more than once where, the areas northwest of this area get kind of maybe not put in the official forecast, but boy, sometimes you get a storm up here that can actually rotate enough to produce something. So that's interesting. Now, I wouldn't hold this as an absolute truth. Of course, all for the forecasting you can say that about, but it does kind of give you an idea that there are two phases to this, really. There's this initial phase here around noon and a little bit after. Then there's this evening phase right here. That's where remember the wind probabilities and the hail probabilities picked up in this area later on. So this is kind of showing you by 5 p.m. that some of those storms are already in progress. I did want to show you some real-time data. So this is the radar loop. Remember, when you're watching this was recorded at 8 a.m. on Thursday. So please take that with a grain of salt. This isn't current if you're watching it at noon, but it does kind of tell you what's going on here. See the tornado warnings that were issued there and the overall severe thunderstorm warnings from Oklahoma City eastward up to Stillwater. So it kind of tells you what the atmosphere might be capable of. And here's what I'd be concerned about. So you see how this right here, if I just draw a line, an area right here, notice how far north that goes. So that is what's being translated as that higher tornado risk up to this area here. So the only question I would have is, can I continue that thought process and draw another one like this? That's the interesting question for today. If you look at a still radar shot, it shows you those tornado warnings here. And that right there, that purple with the white tornado in it, that's actually a tornado that was reported. There's also a wind gust of 60 miles per hour in a couple different places, and at least a 3/4 inch hail report there. It looks like that's southeast of Oklahoma City near Shawnee, in that area. Now, let's take a look at what the simulated radar looks like. So at 10 a.m., that's what this is actually forecast to look like, and it's a little bit behind. In other words, I don't know if those storms will actually be there at 10 a.m. They might be, but I think that's a little bit fast. But then certainly by noon Thursday, we have individual cells here. And again, there might be something producing helicity, spinning rotation up there. But this is the formation of what I think will be possibly a little more serious once it moves eastward later on toward evening. And in fact, by 2 p.m. already, that's already happening. And again, this isn't a widespread severe weather outlook, and this is certainly kind of shy of what you might expect in the spring. But it is something that you need to pay attention to because it is January, and I can guarantee you most people are not thinking this is even a possibility. So that's why I basically issue the heads up, is to try to tell you, hey, you might want to watch out and see if you got some wind gusts, some hail, and that small but present probability of a weak tornado somewhere. I'll watch it through the rest of the day. I don't think another video would be necessary, but maybe some live updates might be possible. So stick with me here, and I hope everybody has a safe day. It'll be cooler after this, so no more of the 60s, but still pretty mild for this time of year. I'll be watching the situation. Thanks for tuning in.